Well, I've now completed the 400 watt antenna tuner, and I've now fitted it into the rest of my station. Here you will see most of the equipment here is homebrew. The Mark V 3-band transceiver, the Mark IV multi-band transceiver, the 100 watt tuner, and the remote rig switch, and the 400 watt tuner. So I'm going to select my Mark V transceiver, which is rig 3. Here I have the remote switching device, and using the 100 watt tuner to control it at the moment, I can select rig number 3. So now I'm just going to demonstrate the tuner by tuning the 80 metre 40 metre trap dipole to 20 metres using the 400 watt tuner, and doing a little test with the linear on and off. So here is the Mark V running 100 watts directly into the 80-40 trap dipole without the tuner. You can see the SWR on that band's quite high. And this is the SWR with the tuner in. As you can see, there's nothing there, not much there at all. So at 10 watts with the tuner in, maybe a little bit more, I'll just adjust the inductance and you'll see the SWR come up. Normally with a T-tuner you try and use the minimum amount of inductance, that's the least amount of loss. Just pull that back, and now I'll adjust the capacitors. So adjusting the input capacitor first, using the 10 steps course adjustment. You can see the SWR slowly come up. Doesn't make that much difference. I'll just get that down to minimum. Went past minimum there, and now I'll select C out and do the same thing. You'll see this knob turning, and we go through a dip. There we go, back there. So that's at about 40 watts. That's 10 watts down there, and that's at 100 watts. I've switched the linear on now. I'll just switch on dummy load. You'll see this light come up telling me I'm on dummy load, and I'll now apply a bit of power. And I'm set on 1000 watts, so that's 400 watts there. A little bit of SWR on my dummy load. Turn that off. So now I'm going to, I've now switched the tuner in between the antenna and the linear. I'm just going to raise the power. That's at 100 watts. That's 200 watts, 300, and that's around 400. A little bit of SWR. So here's the result at 400 watts. I've zoomed in on the needles. There you go. See, SWR is quite low. Let's pull it back out again. At 400 watts, I find the fine control is quite useful. I'm just varying C in at the moment. That's around about 300 watts. You'll see the needle go up and down. I'm now using single stepping, and it's pretty good actually. Just varying the input capacitor. I'll switch to the output capacitor and do the same test. So I'll now do the C out capacitor and just give that a bit of a tweak with the fine control. You can see you can get it quite nice and low. I don't normally adjust the inductor at those sort of powers because it's a pile of relays involved. The capacitors don't mind, they're okay. So generally the idea is to pick the lowest amount of inductance and then start adjusting the capacitors for a minimum SWR. If you don't quite get that, try another value, but try and keep the inductance fixed if possible. When I'm using the linear, I sometimes switch in the 100 watt tuner. It's between the rig output switch and the linear input. I find that on some frequencies the linear input impedance is not 50 ohms, so you get some standing wave or an SWR reading. By putting that tuner in the circuit, I can actually reduce that down. Not really necessary, but I do it. On other occasions, if I don't want to, when I'm not running the linear, there's no need to use the high powered tuner. I just use the 100 watt tuner. It's